Good evening to everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session here today, to this conversation. We're really happy to have you, and we're going to discuss something really interesting on how do cities really work. But we're unpacking an interesting topic today: what really happens after you flush, right? So it's 2026, and we are talking a lot about artificial intelligence, climate, smart cities. But this morning, most of us would have woken up, used the toilet, flushed, and never thought about it again, right? That invisible journey after the flush quietly shapes many things around us: our health, our groundwater, our rivers, and the jobs that really keep our cities running. Yeah, so that's something we're going to talk about today. So I'm Abhilaasha. I'm assistant professor at IIHS University in the School of Systems and Infrastructure. I also work on practice projects at IIHS with a focus on sanitation, gender, and informal housing. And I'm really very, very happy to have my colleagues here today, Kavita and Niladri. And I'm happy to say that, these two people today whom we're going to have conversations with have done a lot of interesting work. So Kavita spent years working on sanitation systems, policy, and implementation across cities. And Niladri has worked on urban infrastructure and services across different Indian states and cities. We will hear more about them and their work in the next hour. But I wanted to take this moment to welcome both of you.
Thank you, Abhilaasha, for having us.
Yeah. So you all must be wondering that why are these three people, sitting together and discussing something? So what's common between us? All three of us have worked on a large statewide program for the last 10 years. That is the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, or the TNU SSP. You'll keep hearing this word for the next hour or so. And we all also teach at the master's program at IIHS University. So before we jump into the conversation, we are looking at the question and answer box. So we encourage you all to drop your questions over there, and we will definitely have a lot of time to respond to the questions after our conversation, which will be for about like 30 minutes or so. Yeah, so without much ado, let's get into the discussion. So I was just telling everyone here, right, that we are actually living through an AI revolution, and cities are talking about many things. The buzzwords are sensors, dashboards, right? And today, actually, we're spending 1 hour on something which we do every single day, which is pretty much forgotten, right? Flushing, sanitation. So why are we doing this? So let's watch a short video before we get into all the talking.
19th century, London was at the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It was a city teeming with innovation, industry, and people. However, fueled by overcrowding, poverty, and poor sanitation, diseases were widespread. There were large outbreaks of cholera that led to the deaths of thousands of people. Enter John Snow, not the King of the North, but a young physician trained as an anesthetist. Although we now know that cholera is caused by a bacterium, at the time the existing idea was that it was caused by bad air from rotting material, the miasma theory. Snow went against the prevailing beliefs of the time and proposed that cholera was spread by contaminated water. In 1854, Snow started investigating a large cholera outbreak in the Soho district of London where he worked. He got a list of people who had died from cholera and analyzed where they lived. He found that they lived around a pump on Broad Street that people used for drinking water. Interestingly, he also noticed 2 areas in the neighborhood where people hardly got sick. He found that they were using alternate sources of drinking water. From these observations, Snow concluded that contaminated water from the Broad Street pump was what was making people sick. Although his ideas were treated with skepticism, Snow convinced authorities to remove the handle of the pump so it could not be used. The outbreak ended shortly after. Investigations later revealed that the pump was drawing water from an area contaminated by fecal material from a nearby cesspit that was used to collect sewage. Snow continued to use data to show how cholera was transmitted. His pioneering work laid the foundation for modern epidemiology, the study of how and why diseases occur in different groups of people. His cholera map is a classic example of demonstrating the value of mapping in understanding and controlling the spread of diseases. With significant advancements in modern geographic information systems, mapping continues to be a powerful epidemiological tool. And that's the story of John Snow and his battle with cholera.
So I think people associated with the name Jon Snow have interesting stories after all. So I think this story really tells us why sanitation is important, right? And looks like we've realized this in the 1800s. So, Kavita, I'm just curious and maybe like I'm resonating with the audience at the moment. Why are we today in 2026 on one fine evening still talking about sanitation?
Thanks, Abhilasha, for that. I think before we come to the current day, we still have to understand that why what Jon Snow did was so pioneering. And I think I'm talking about a survey conducted by readers of the British Medical Journal, who are mostly doctors, people from the medical profession, and this is around a decade ago, so not that old, right? And they were asked to rank the most defining uh, medical invention of the 20th century. And they voted for sanitation by crossing things like vaccination, which we associate with saving lives, or antibiotics, which again is, we all know, is critical, right? And I think the question we have to ask is, why was sanitation about those? Why were the people who actually practice medicine voting for sanitation? And that's to say that sanitation has a huge impact on health, public health. If we do not take care of sanitation, uh, lives are going to be lost, and particularly under five, sanitation still remains the second largest, mortality reason for under five mortality. And and so apart from the health, of course, there is also the environmental angle. We still see stinking rivers, stinking nalas as we go about in the cities. We're all familiar with that. And that brings me to the current thing, that if we knew that that was the case now, then, and we know deaths are being caused in generally other ill health, even if not deaths, there are other health issues. Why are we in this place now? Now, we can unpack those reasons later, but we are in a very bad situation. Still, I would say there's significant gaps in sanitation, whether it's toilet access or whether it's the rest of the journey, like you said, what happens after it flushes. And we'll unpack that. So there are significant gaps. And if we do want those health benefits, if we do want those environmental benefits, we do need to treat sanitation with utmost priority.
Thank you, Kavita. So, Kavita has said that we do need to treat sanitation with utmost priority, but I will ask one question here to Niladri. So, when we say sanitation, when Kavita is alluding to this term and we are talking about this in this discussion, what do we exactly mean? Niladri, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Abhilasha. Well, to be honest, sanitation predominantly equated with toilet or toilet construction, but that is not the case, right? Okay, even if we talk only about the infrastructure, there also toilet is just the entry point. We can understand why toilet is perceived as a sanitation, because one obvious reason, it is the visible thing, it is the urgent thing. And also, if you look at our policies, at our national programs, their success metrics are always how many toilet constructed or coverage. Okay, but if any city really want to have a successful or not successful, properly working sanitation system, if we look meticulously, you'll see there are lots of moving parts. Yes, of course, we can start with the infrastructure. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, it is not just the toilet. It is, as you are referring, it's the full chain. Because if we construct the toilet, people use the toilet, then definitely waste will be generated. Now, that waste has to be contained safely, because Kavita elaborated how it has larger public health implications, right? And then that has to be transported safely, treated safely. So it's a chain full, the infrastructure. Now, coming to that, this infrastructure has to be used. Just having infrastructure is not enough, right? Someone has to clean the toilet, someone has to take out the waste, someone has to treat the waste, someone has to dispose. So here comes your service. So it's not just the thing. Now, when someone has to do, means here coming the institutions. Some institution has to play the role or has to be accountable for that. And it's not just not necessarily it's the only government institutions, right? There will be non-state partner as well. For doing entire thing, you need resources, not only just the human resources. You need finance, yeah. and how this institution will work. So again, it comes the governance, how they will govern, and finally your regulation. Okay, again, I'm taking cue from what Kavita was mentioning, because sanitation, if it is not rightly there, then it has larger implication in terms of public health, in terms of population. So you can see lots of moving parts, and if one section fails, then we'll find our city with outbreak of disease. We'll find our water bodies with lots of fecal waste, and trust me, even in 2026. So sanitation is not just a toilet; it's a full system, a life system.
So I like how we are unpacking this. As Niladri was speaking, I was kind of building this mind map as you were talking, like sanitation is a chain, and the waste is produced in a toilet, and just you were alluding to, it is stored somewhere, it is taken somewhere, and then it is treated. And then it looks like this particular chain then touches various other systems around it, like water supply, solid waste. You were alluding to the services that keep it going, and all this is linked to like bigger goals in the city, like climate goals. So it's really fascinating, like how everything around us in cities is part of many, many systems kind of working together, right? So, but here I'd like to go back to Kavita. So, looks like this full chain is something important, right? So, is this some kind of new discovery, or have you always known like to think in terms of chains and in terms of systems?
So I think having been working in this area for so long, I sometimes myself wonder, right? Did we not know about this? And of course, I mean, being frivolous here, of course, we knew that you had to, essentially, what is the principle? That you have to safely treat the waste and dispose of safely. That means there should be no contamination, right? But for some reason, and I think I'll come to the reason. I think I know why. The focus has always been on toilets, right? And that's there at the international level and national. So internationally, if you see, I think many listeners would be, a participant will be familiar that we had MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, and then we had SDGs. Well, SDGs are also coming to an end now, but when the MDGs came out, and if you look at what was there in sanitation, it was basically the indicator was only about increase in access to toilets, right? When the SDGs came out more than a decade later, they did shift the focus from saying, okay, we can't just look at toilets, we have to look at percentage of wastewater treated. And so there was not an acknowledgement of the full chain, but I would say there was an acknowledgement that you have to go beyond toilets, right? In India, I think we all know Swachh Bharat Mission, and Swachh Bharat Mission first phase was all about toilets. But the thing is, and many people may not know, is there's been a long history of sanitation projects in India. There's been Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan, there was TCS, the TSC, the I mean, forget about the specific name, starting in 70s, 80s. They all focused on toilets, and they all focused primarily in rural areas, right? And then, of course, Swachh Bharat, also the initial phase focused on toilets. It's only now, not only now, I would say more than, I think, 2007, 8, National Urban Sanitation Policy came out, which actually said that, hey, it's not enough for the toilets to be there. You need to actually treat the whole chain. And then subsequently, second phase of Swachh Bharat Mission, Amrut, etc. All the new age government programs are actually looking at. Again, I would say not holistically necessarily, but yes, there's an acknowledgement that toilets are a starting point and not the end point. To come back to why it was there, it could be many things, but one of the reasons was, I think, the number of people without toilets was so high in India and globally, in certain Africa and certain parts of Asia or Latin America, that I think we focused on that. And that's why I say that it is an important point, and it is an important thing to ensure access to toilets. But yeah, like I said, that's just the starting point. And I'm very glad that we are now moving away from that to an understanding that, you have to treat the whole chain.
Yeah, so looks like in the past 2 decades, we have been thinking more and more about that and acting on that as well. So, from this infrastructure to systems, looking at the chain and the systems, what does this really look like on ground? and in practice, for example, like Niladri, can you tell us that what this actually translates to on the ground?
Yeah, sure. I think the program which you are referring, the TNU SSP Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, where we three work, I think that's the best program. We can take some example from there. So after spending almost 10 years, when I look at in retrospect, I see the kind of work and the spectrum is quite wide. And the way Kavita was narrating now, see in this program of last 10 years, it was not just about the only toilet construction, but rather more time gone into some other thing, right? Right, right, getting the appropriate technology for the entire chain, uh, uh, which is very contextual, which is considering all other subsystem and sector of the urban. Then how multiple institutions, because in urban space, the sanitation take it with multiple institutions. So that creates some clutter, right? So there often we found overlaps in the roles and responsibility. How that can be strengthened. So that was a major chunk of work. Then, of course, as I was referring in earlier conversation, that regulations. So, I mean, legal instruments to regulate this entire service delivery and standards, etc. You need a strong regulation. So amendment of the acts, having right kind of rule. Uh, the system has to have its own capacity. So capacity building. Then finance is a big thing. How this finance thing, not only for constructing toilet or as a matter of fact, STP, etc., but how the operation maintenance can be taken care and what mechanism should be there. So see, there are so many in this entire spectrum, so many type of works, and they are not siloed. One part always complement to others, so that the entire service delivery or entire ultimate the larger public health goal or larger environmental protection goal is taken care. So I think this is how a big program, state-led program, which was actually, as you rightly said, spearheaded by the IIHS in tandem with Tamil Nadu government and so many stakeholders look like on the ground.
Yeah, so many stakeholders, the scale of the program, and working across the chain, and working with the system. So you have set a lot of points for us to think of how this will actually be on the ground. So I'm shifting gears to Kavita now. So what makes something like the program which Niladri just mentioned, the NUSSP, right? And its story different. And I want to say at this point that we do teach our students about programs like TNUSSP, which we have actually implemented. So could you reflect and share some stories for everyone who's here?
Yeah. So I think Niladri's, I mean, part of the answer was hidden in Niladri's answer also, which is that, I mean, the sheer scale of ambition of the program of doing so many things, it was different. But if I had to point out a couple of more things, I think the first thing we have to understand that whenever we've tried to scale something or adapt something on scale, it's usually been learning from the quote unquote the West or the global North, right? And we have said, okay, they've built metros. How do we build metros? They've built the good bad, they built highways. How do we build highways? So it's always been an example from which we've tried to emulate. Now what happened is, and I just let me speak a bit about this because we've not, so sanitation has historically been done through sewers, which is your piped network, right? Which is what you see in big cities, metros in India, and that's what London, Paris, etc., and whatever. And but the fact is that many of our toilets are on-site systems, which is essentially pit latrines or septic tanks. And I don't want to get into too much of jargon, but the point is, and then that waste has to be collected in trucks and transported. So let's just say another way, different way of doing things, which is the decentralized manner, but which is safe enough, which is cost effective, and which builds on the existing infrastructure. Now, this has not been done in the West. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the West, it exists in many places where in semi-urban areas, in large tracts, but not at scale. So one story comes to mind is that, of course, we started Teen Youth because we had a government champion, and he kind of was very keen that Tamil Nadu should have decentralized sanitation systems. And so he was there, but we were obviously trying to build stakeholders, win stakeholders within the system. And so we were talking to other senior government officer, and one of them turned around, and he was the head of the department. He's like, "You're trying this new thing. I've not heard of it. So tell me, where can I go see it in the world?" And we were like, "Nowhere." And he was like, "What do you mean nowhere?" And we were like, "No, this has not been done in Europe. And this thing, it's been, of course, it's been done in parts of Southeast Asia, whether there was Malaysia, there was Indonesia, but not at the scale at which Tamil Nadu was thinking of." And he was taken aback. And he was like, "So how do we know it works?" And anyway, so there's a whole story of how do you then build credibility when there's nothing to see. And we had to turn around and tell him that, we are actually hoping. And the donor at that time stepped in and said, "We are hoping that Tamil Nadu is the place where people come and see how these systems work," and which is what happened subsequently 10 years of the program. So I think, so what was different was that you were trying something which I'm not saying the solutions didn't exist. They did not exist at scale, right? And so that was something ambitious. The other thing was, I just want to say about the scale question. Many of us are born and brought up and lived in India, and we're just used to the scale. But I think we just want to remind everybody that many states are larger than many countries and so when you're talking about scaling in a state, it's like covering a small country. Some of our cities are larger than us, than some countries. So I think we don't have this. If we, and this is not just for sanitation. If we have to do the whole energy transition, you want to do decentralized energy systems, you want to speed up your transportation coverage. The scale is not being seen, except maybe probably China, and as we know, China is a very different kind of country. So we are innovating here, and the scale is very different. And I just want to close this out by just again going back to what Niladri said, that many programs, even if they're looking at the full chain, they tend to look at either the engineering aspect or they will only look at the policy. I think what was also interesting about Teen USSP was that it covered all of this. There was regulation, there was policy, financing, technology, behavior change, capacity. Of course, I'm throwing these out as things, but obviously they came together in a matter. And I think, yeah, that's what made TNUSSP so exciting.
Yeah, so thanks for those insights. And I'm just going to take one point from what Kavita was just talking about, that yes, we are speaking about the sanitation system and one program, large scale program over here. But in IIHS University, in the master's program, we delve into all sorts of various urban systems, as Kavita was alluding to: transportation, water, solid waste, housing and land, health, governance, finance, to name a few. So we kind of work together to see, how can we navigate these urban systems and think of innovative solutions for the problems which keep emerging day on day. So yes, so I'd like to hold back to Kavita for one more question. Because you were speaking about the urban, right? You were also shifting gears when you were and responding just now. So it made me wonder that, how did you actually start working in the urban? And do you see things differently today versus what it was when you started off?
Yeah, so there's a very funny story that I share. So I'm trained as an architect. Please never ask me how to design a building in collapse, for sure. I've not practiced architecture, but when I was doing architecture, I think I very much soon realized that if I wanted to earn a living doing architecture, I had to again, the situation has changed now, but at that time was to design some really fancy houses for some very rich people, and I realized I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something more meaningful. I'm not that good houses are not necessary in this country, but and so we discovered urban as part of our studies, as part of our dissertation and seminar, and studios. I discovered this fancy thing called urban, and it was kind of love at first, not sight, but I don't know, love at first instance of discovering urban. And I, in my whatever confused way in my undergrad degree, I was like, but my understanding is not same. I can't just have a spatial understanding of how things should be, which is important, but there is the whole social aspect of it, and there is this whole the economics of it. How do you make certain projects happen? So I started wondering, how do we get towards the kind of cities we want, right? And in that kind of muddled, confused this thing, but I was like interdisciplinary. And at that time, there wasn't too many courses. And so when I started writing my statement of purpose for different universities, my friends were like, we don't know what you're talking about. But I discovered this course at LSE and I went to it and studied, and with all its flaws, but yeah, kind of became an interdisciplinary, whatever, urban student. And the interesting thing was, then I came back all excited to make changes in the urban, and I'm telling you, all the jobs that I got was to design malls. Because when I came back, one of the first few malls in India had just been constructed in Delhi, where I was living at that time. And it was also, you're like, yeah, yeah, you're an urban designer, come design the mall. And I'm like, where is the urban in it? And they were like, yeah, you're designing this nice plaza outside with a fountain. So that's and so I essentially didn't have a job in the urban, and so I instead of going down that route, I had to kind of make my career by getting into rural and then getting into an organization that worked on rural and urban both, and do a little bit of rural sanitation, do a little bit of rural disaster kind of thing, and then some urban services project would come across, and then yeah, then I just happened and all of that. So yeah, I'm it was pretty much like getting what you took what you got, what was there in the market, and did your own reading on the side. But I think that has changed substantially now. I think by after I entered the job market is around just before that, I think Gain in Yaran, which is the first what we like to call as first generation urban program, had came up, and then we had FBM and Amrut and smart cities and all of these things. So a lot of investments flew in. There was also increasing political recognition of the urban. So apart from that, there were a lot of private investments that went to a city. I mean, I talk about investments not because they're the only important thing, but that just meant that those they led to creation of infrastructure, they led to expansion of services, and so there was a lot of more attention and more work being done on the ground. And we've also seen a lot of so for example, when at that time there were only a few urban NGOs. So there was Spark in Bombay, and there was the whole Seva family, right? But now there are many more even non-profit. So I would definitely say, in terms of jobs, if you're talking about very practically jobs, there are many more. But that also means that going beyond the pragmatic, there are many more places from where you can bring about change, right? So you could be within the government. Even the government now has lateral entry. It has some kind of private sector entries involved, and you have the private sector itself, then you have the non-profit, and of course the academia. So in that sense, I think urban is a much more exciting space to be. There's much more to do than a couple of decades back, when you're still trying to. And we were like, okay, we were like, urban, what is that? It was like that kind of a situation at that time.
So yes, so urban is an exciting place to be, and there are many, many interesting opportunities. It's great. So, Niladri, I know your career and stories will be really interesting as well. And if any of you are interested, I think you should write to Niladri to know more about that story. But I have a question for Niladri in the context of urban, but in terms of careers, like careers in the sense, like we all are part of teams, right?
Yeah.
So, what kind of teams have you been part of, or would you like to speak about the teams you have built or helped to build? Because you and Kavita have led large teams. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with that team, I worked or I have been part in IIHS or even beyond IIHS. The kind of work or kind of problem we try to solve, it has been always multidisciplinary. So interestingly, at the same time, I have worked with civil engineers, environmental engineers, social scientists, person with marketing experts, social scientists, and of late we worked with occupational health safety experts. So you can see the range, right? So that demands, I mean, the kind of problem we try to solve, it demands this different skill set. But in the hindsight, the problem is that when you are dealing such kind of team of multidiscipline, it is always, at least at the initial days, it is always a bit tricky to get the synergy, because conventionally our engineers are not very well versed about what my social scientist is doing on the ground. I mean, why so much time is getting into community mobilization, and vice versa. When my social scientist is thinking why my civil engineer and the team is trying to measure everything in terms of efficiency and all, right? So that works a little bit in a silo. So getting in synergy, it takes some time. But having said that, I think here is, I see the value of the kind of course IIHS has curated and delivered. See, the master's program IIHS offerings by design, they are interdisciplinary, right? So, the aspirants who will be having this course, they will get the language, they will have this lens in modern problem solving, when they will be really exposed to the real world, the problem. I believe they will be much lesser myopic. Their approach to the solving the problem will be more holistic, and it will not be so siloed. That's definitely my anticipation, I would say.
All right. So this is sort of my last kind of question, but for you both to kind of reflect on, and I hope I'm resonating with the audience here when I ask, like, as a student, right? What will really help me to prepare for the world? We have spoken a lot about urban systems, working the urban
Right.
change. So, like as a student, or like, how does one really affect change in urban systems? I would like to hear from both of you.
Okay, so I'm going first. So, see, basically, you you start very simple. Keep things very simple. As you are asking this question as a student, so I'll be telling, start thing very simple. Uh, just look around in your city. Today we had a lots of discussion on sanitation. So you can look how the entire sanitation system works in your city, or maybe water supply, or maybe power, or maybe morning how this milk supply chain works, or the LPG supply chain works. How so many things happen, and how different systems. What is the intersection of those systems? Yeah, I think that should be your starting point to understand, to unpack the way you are describing today's sessions. And coming back to wash or sanitation, I would say, as Kavita was also referring, lots of flagship programs are there, policy out there, and all, whether it is Amrut, SBM, JNRM, and all the mission documents, etc., are available in the public domain. So, and not so overwhelming. So, as a student, you can download that, you can glance through that. It will give you a overarching idea how policy was framed, how this kind of large flagship programs are executed on ground, how the success metrics, etc. So I think to start with, this is a fair point to start with, I think. And yeah, one more thing I want to reiterate is that, again, I think what I was telling, I was advocating for the interdisciplinary. This kind of urban transformation, urban change, there is a work for everybody, because the gravitas of the problem or everything is such that there is a need for engineers, as well as there is a need for a communication experts, as well as there is a need for social scientists. So everybody has to come and work, but in synergy. And that is why this interdisciplinarity is so important. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Yeah. Kavita?
Yeah, I think somewhat similar to Niladri. I would say that the best way to learn as a student, and I think we are students all our life, is by doing.
Yeah,
I think what we get to do as we gain more experience probably is bigger in scale, maybe, and more complex. But even with simpler things, I think I firmly believe, and probably that's part of my training in, architecture and urban and planning, that you need to see things, you need to do things, you need to experience a couple of failures on the way to do, and that's the kind of opportunity, like, I think we have in Practica and other places, and IHS courses. And I also think learning from practitioners, right? And that's what, like you mentioned, that we teach from TNUSSP, we also teach from other significant practice programs. We also get practitioners from other other like outside IHS, right? And so and that those lessons are very important. And I just want to kind of round this up by saying that it's not only important to learn by doing and talking to practitioners, but also then connecting it back to, I wouldn't just say theory, but connecting it back to the literature. Because while often we feel, oh, we are breaking new ground, and we are, but somebody has done something. And so to learn from that and make that connections, do that reflection, connecting literature and your work, is something very important, and which is a discipline I think one must discipline, and I would say a joyful exercise that we should engage with from the time when we are students, I guess.
So that's great. I think the uh, biggest message I kind of take from here is that whatever be your background, if you're from engineering, social science, design, or any background, I think there's a way into urban systems, and there's a lot to learn from theory, from our programs, from what we see and what we actually hear from experiences and all of that. And there's a lot and lot of demand, and of course alluding to what you've been speaking, a lot of problems which need innovative solutions. So I think those of you who are looking for a master's at the IIHS University, after these masters you can work on the ground, you can work with the system. Like Niladri has spoken a lot about the institutions, and Kavita also spoke about how there are government and allied jobs. You can be part of think tanks, you can work in NGOs, or you can be an entrepreneur. So the opportunities are many. So that's good news. So I think that has been quite a lot of information and experience sharing from our end. Um, uh, we, if any of you have any questions, you can put it on the Q&A box. You can bring it up. As you do that, we just want to leave you with like a quick exercise or a task, which could be fun. You can look around you, take your own home, and kind of think about your home as a system, part of a larger system. And you can pick one or two of the floors in your home, like human waste, it could be solid waste from your dustbin, it could be water, it could be electricity, it could be anything. And ask these questions like, how does this enter my home? What happens after it leaves? And try to make a map, like, map the full path to see what infrastructure it uses as it exits the house, what services kind of move it through our cities, and who handles these things, who are the workers, and which institutions really come up as the path goes from your home to wherever it's reaching. So that'll be something interesting to do. And if you do make that map, please write to us, and we'd love to, have a look and chat with you about that as well. So if there are any questions, this is the time to ask. As people are kind of thinking probably about the questions, so I have a question to both of you. Any of you can answer this. So can you, like, you have spoken about many things, and we have alluded to what's being taught in our master's program from real practice and how we bridge the practice and theory connect. So would you like to speak about any particular aspects in one of our masters which really bring that out, like a course or like an example in which how we take practice into the classroom and how we engage with students?
Yeah, I think a very simple way, the exposure visits, I must say, because here our students are taken to the sites where actually the work is happening right on the ground. So it's not just the theory we are teaching them in the class. They are visiting, and they are actually interacting the stakeholders, right? Who are actually doing the work right on the, other than IHS people. So whether it's a government functionary, whether dislodging operator, whether who manage the STP, I think, and I think at the beginning of the session today, the video, the lots of students are sharing the same, and I think that's the best way, because always something, the best way of learning, as Kavita was also telling the same, learning by doing. And when getting the concepts of, let's say, full chain, when I'm right on the ground and seeing how this actually, what's the fate of the waste, and who are people, which is mostly largely invisible. So that that's open up the real world to the student. That's I think so.
Anything to add, Kavita?
No, but I mean, I just kind of carrying on from what Niladri is saying. I think exposure visits are very powerful because having taught a course around a so-called in-class theory course, which also had some elements of field, but and then kind of giving assignments for it, which asked them to, uh, not memorize things, but what was their understanding of infrastructure and services. And we didn't mention the exposure visits anywhere, but it was the end of the term, kind of assignment, and the number of students who kind of articulated their understanding from where they came from, right? And also our class is hugely diverse. So connecting to their hometowns or villages, and also then connecting it to these exposure visits. And so it again goes back to what we've been discussing about, learning by seeing, learning by doing. And so I just want to reiterate that was something. But it works out that even if that's a separate course, it then gets integrated back into the so-called theory courses.
Great. So, I think I'm becoming the voice of the students in this webinar. So, I have like one more question and then like we can close. So, what are some different things that the IHS Masters does in your opinion? Like it could be fun, it could be anything. One thing to kind of close off.
I think for me, I'll go first and then Niladri. I think for me the powerful thing of any teaching at IHS has been the aspects of peer learning, and that's also the fun part, right? I think we get students from all disciplines, and so everybody doesn't have the same vocabulary, and so everybody's helping out each other. Disciplines, life experiences, both, right? And it is a stretch. I don't want to by any stretch saying that, oh, interdisparity, it happens, right? It is difficult for somebody who's never looked at maps before to say what the hell is this, right? Or somebody who's been just groomed in, kind of engineering kind of stuff, and then to say, okay, now go and look at institutions, right? And I think, and that's why we insist that our program is a residential one, because what you learn in the classroom is great, but what you're learning from your own peer cohort is, I think, much, much greater. And yeah, that's what I would like to end with this with.
Niladri, if you want to respond, you can, but there's one question in the chat, and any of you can take it. Will students learn about sanitation irrespective of their master's program? Wow, great. Yes.
Yes, we will. They will, because you will not only learn about sanitation, but you will learn about in introduction to all the infrastructure systems, because we have a course just on that. So yes.
That's great. Niladri, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking to add with Kavita about the uniqueness of our program. And Kavita was a life lesson. I say also, I just endorse life skill. So here students get an opportunity to cook their own meal and swimming. So these are, I believe this is a life skill, because so it's a discipline as well as it's a fun way of learning. Fun way of learning. So that's the uniqueness.
Great. So I would then take this opportunity to thank primarily Kavita and Niladri for sharing all those wonderful insights with us. Oh, we have another question. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read this out. A lot of our rivers are being polluted while sustaining life. How is the ecosystem coping to deal with this? Any action plan to retain fresh water?
Okay, I think Niladri is better placed to answer this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in a simple way, telling is that yes, I'm sure you know about the Namami Ganga Action Plan, and yes, our rivers are getting polluted, mostly in the downstream. But how this entire thing is done, it will take some time to explain. But yes, efforts are there. But again, as we are explaining, it needs uh, lots involvement of lots of stakeholder system. Like I can give you an example of some work which I just did in one of the river Tamarapurni in Tamil Nadu, where when we are trying to understand how polluted the river stretch was, It was not just a conventional way. We just measured the BOD, COD, try to understand the load of the fecal coliform there. Along with that, we had to also understand the socio-political and socio-cultural aspects, because you rightly pointed out the questions. River is also lifeline in many ways. So how culturally people are involved with the river, etc., is also very, very important. So yes, there are lots of program happening in different part of the India. Uh, the classic example is the Namami Gange, which is mostly to keep our river clean. But how this entire thing happens, I would request you a little bit go and read, because documents are there, uh, and you will understand how again how interdisciplinary here also becomes so key thing to solve this kind of problem. Yeah.
There's another question. Do you think market solutions are possible in sanitation, or will it always have to be managed by the state?
Oh, I think the answer will differ by who you're asking it to. But since you're asking us, my answer is that the market, or let's say, uh, I'm not clear what you mean by the market, but I would say private sector will always have a role. Or let me put it, private sector will have a role, but public sector will always have a role. So I think for not just for sanitation, but for any public service, whether it's water, whether it's sanitation, whether it's solid waste, mobility, and which I think should be public services, there will always be the role of the government. This doesn't mean that the government has to be the only service provider, that they're actually servicing the water or whatever, so there is a role, there could be role for private sector, but I do not see, and I would argue there are some things that the private sector could do more efficiently and could do more meaningfully, but the public sector cannot write off and say that this is now we've given it to the private sector. I think the final responsibility and accountability lies with the government for these things.
Are there any more questions? Because last time I rushed to finish and we had 3 questions.
I do have a question while the others sort of come back, touching back on the video played earlier on the cholera itself. I don't think at the moment we are almost repeating history again, because if we take Bangalore as a context and last year peak summer to now, there has actually been multiple outbreaks, because our fresh waters have gone below the level that one's able to reach, the capacities have increased, and the water that's being given to people is contaminated. So what are the kind of strategies or mitigations that people can do at household level to ensure that they're safe? So this touches a little bit on climate health, but more importantly, access to water.
So, Subhay, are you saying what can we do at the household level? Is that the question?
Yes, yes, yes. I think because a lot of people at this in peak summer will start struggling to figure out fresh water, especially people who come from areas that don't get enough. So I think that'll be a very interesting thing to reflect on, perhaps.
Okay, so I'll go first and then Ladvi can add. So my honest answer is that I don't think this problem is solvable at a household level only, right? And the reason I'm saying that part of our problem has been created because the rich and the middle class have tried to solve this at an individual household level. We think we can buy our way out by buying these water purifiers, etc., etc. And you know, ultimately, if the water is getting polluted, it is a common good. If it's groundwater, whether it's surface water, we are going to come in contact with that contaminated water or something. So you cannot keep on privatizing it. I know that's not the spirit with which you asked the question. So I'm just saying yes. So what do the poor household do? What do people who don't have access to these things? I think there are some very simple methods of treatment that are there, whether it's boiling or it's filtration, and these are well documented, and people can do that to kind of protect themselves, but I think in the end, we need to improve the system as a whole. And I think a classic example drawing upon something else, which all of us are in India are familiar with, is air pollution. We thought we cannot escape anything that's a common good. It will come and bite us at some point. But yeah, for now, I think practical way forward is to kind of treat water at the household level.
Niladri?
No, I think Kavita has highlighted the part. I mean, yes, I totally agree with her. And she already mentioned, I mean, if it's an emergency, then to respond to that should be the water treatment at the household level, which we call POU, point of use water treatment. But sometimes boiling, etc., also becoming issues because it has the fuel and other cost implication. So I'm just giving it's again being it's not a permanent solution, but to tackle this kind of situation, chlorine tablet can be used, which is very cheap. Is available, and it is much cheaper than even boiling. So that can be also used at the household level, other than boiling and treatment unit. Yes.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, then I'm also looking at the time. So we're close to our 1 hour. So let me take this opportunity to thank Kavita and Niladri again. You've shared great insights, and it was really nice to hear both the stories and also your experiences. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who joined, asked questions, and listened to us for the past 1 hour. And I'd like to leave you all by saying that if you're interested in learning to work on urban systems, apply to the IIHS University. The admission call is open and the deadline is tomorrow, March 20th. And we have our 5 master's programs. And don't miss the opportunity to apply. And in the beginning of this webinar, a lot of links were pasted on the chat. So you can access that and apply. And we hope you join us in, real journeys where we connect data policy design and practice. And we look forward to seeing many of you in our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kavita,
Thank
Abhilaasha,
you.
Niladri.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Abhilasha. Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.